The veteran who never spoke, until a letter from Vietnam found him. The rain came quietly that afternoon. No thunder, no fanfare, just a soft patter on the tin roof, like someone lightly tapping their fingers above his head. Tom Barrett sat on the porch of his old cabin, nestled in the pine woods of southern Oregon, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. His knees creaked each time he shifted in the worn wooden rocker, but he didn't mind the pain anymore. It had become as familiar as the rustle of the trees. On the small table beside him lay a yellow envelope, slim, weather-worn, and addressed in a looping hand he didn't recognize. It had arrived with the morning post, tucked between a utility bill and a local hardware flyer. He hadn't touched it since, not until now. He reached for it slowly, as though the letter might vanish if he moved too quickly. His fingers trembled as they peeled the flap open. Inside, one folded sheet, cream-colored, written in black ink. The first line wasn't in English, it was Vietnamese. His breath caught. He hadn't seen the language in over 50 years, not since the war, not since the rice paddies, the firelight in the trees, the endless nights. The script looked softer now, as though the years had dulled its sharpness, but the effect was the same. It hit like a whisper from a ghost. He fumbled for his reading glasses and unfolded the page. The first words had been carefully translated into English below the original Vietnamese. To the man who saved us in 1970, I don't know your name, but I remember your eyes. Tom stared. Then he read the line again. He leaned back, heart thudding dully in his chest. The letter was short, maybe 100 words. It spoke of a village near Hugh, of a day in July, of a soldier who put down his rifle and stepped back when others didn't. A soldier who said nothing, but whose silence had been the reason a woman and her children had lived. And now she had found him, somehow. My daughter found your notebook at an auction house in Ho Chi Minh City. It had a name, yours. I hope this letter finds you alive. If it does, thank you. You don't need to reply. I just needed you to know. Lynn. Tom folded the letter with slow, careful hands and placed it back into the envelope. He sat there for a long time. The rain kept falling. He didn't go inside. Not right away. The cabin behind him was quiet, save for the low hum of an old radio playing jazz on a faraway station. Inside were framed photographs, one of a younger Tom in uniform, arm around a woman with a tired smile. Beside it, a picture of a boy with dark hair and round cheeks, Daniel, his adopted son, half Vietnamese, the son of a nurse who had died in childbirth at an Oklahoma clinic. Tom never told him why he had agreed to raise him, not fully. The past wasn't something he shared easily. He lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years, and let the smoke curl upward, mixing with the mist. A memory stirred, reluctant at first, but then it unspooled. The heat, the gunmetal air, the smell of wet earth, diesel, and sweat. Hugh, 1970. Why are you going back there? Someone had asked him once, decades ago. You came back already. But Tom never truly had. Part of him, the part that watched and didn't speak, that stood frozen while others shouted, had stayed behind. In that village, in that moment. And now, after all these years, that moment had come looking for him. He stood slowly, bones stiff, and walked inside. He pulled open the drawer of a dusty desk, rummaging past receipts and old photographs until he found what he was looking for, a faded green notebook, water-stained, warped. He opened it. The pages smelled like time. Inside were short entries, some just a date and a word or two. July 12th, checkpoint west of the Banyan, screaming, kids. July 13th, we're the ghosts. July 14th, didn't tell them, can't sleep. And then the page that haunted him most. She looked at me like I was a person, not a soldier, not a threat, just a man, and I couldn't be what she thought I was, not that day. He closed the book gently. Outside, the wind had picked up. That evening, Daniel called. "Hey, Pop, you all right? Weather okay?" Tom hesitated. "I got a letter today." "Yeah? From who?" Tom looked at the envelope. "From the past." A pause. Then Daniel's voice softer. "Vietnam?" "Yeah." "You want to talk about it?" Tom was quiet for a moment. Then, "Not yet, but I think I need to." Later that night, after Daniel had hung up and the stars blinked quietly through the pines, Tom sat at his desk with a blank sheet of paper in front of him. He stared at it for a long time before picking up his pen. Hugh, 1970. I remember the day before it happened more clearly than the day itself, because that was the last day I thought I could stay human in a place built to erase all traces of it. He wrote slowly. The pen scratched like footsteps across silence. And just like that, the door opened. The memory began to flood back. The jungle, the boy in the field, the woman behind the banyan tree, the sound of boots. And the moment one life changed, and 3 others were spared. The first thing Tom Barrett remembered about Vietnam wasn't the heat. It was the color green. It wasn't one shade. It was every shade. From the pale lime of the rice fields to the deep emerald of the jungle, to the almost black moss clinging to rusted metal and rotting tree trunks. Even the mud had a greenish tint. It wasn't just a color. It was a presence. It seeped into his uniform, his skin, his lungs. They landed near Phu Bai in the spring of 1970, 2 weeks after the Cambodian campaign began. Tom was 22 years old. Drafted, trained in Fort Benning, shipped off in the middle of a thunderstorm. He hadn't even told his mother goodbye properly. Just a short call from a crowded airport payphone. He hadn't known what to expect. But it wasn't this. The base was little more than a cluster of sandbags, corrugated metal, and radio towers, red clay paths between tents, laughter that didn't sound real, the smell of burning trash and something metallic always in the air. His platoon leader was Lieutenant Craig, a clean-cut Texan who chewed toothpicks like they were a food group and had already done 1 tour. Craig called Tom poetry because Tom kept a small leather notebook in his vest. He never said what was in it. He didn't have to. The first night, Tom couldn't sleep, not because of the heat or the noise, but because of the silence in his head, like his thoughts were waiting for permission to begin unraveling. He stared at the ceiling of the tent while his squad mates snored or muttered in dreams they wouldn't remember. Somewhere beyond the camp's edge, frogs croaked and insects sang their endless, maddening lullaby. That night he wrote, "Vietnam feels like a place that remembers things, things that don't belong to it, things it didn't ask for." They were stationed near a string of villages west of Hue. Their mission was classified as rural stabilization. In practice, it meant patrolling jungles, clearing paths, and questioning farmers who never looked anyone in the eye. It also meant watching everything die in slow motion. There was a boy, first week on patrol, maybe 9, maybe younger, standing beside a buffalo, holding a wooden stick like it meant something. He stared at the platoon as they passed, unmoving, unblinking. Then Craig called out, "Keep eyes on the tree lines. Don't look at the kids. The kids aren't your mission." But Tom looked anyway, because the boy wasn't afraid, and that made Tom afraid. Over the following days, he learned how to walk without sound, how to listen for footsteps that weren't theirs, how to duck instinctively when the leaves shifted in the wrong rhythm. He learned how to step over broken bodies. One morning, after an overnight recon, they found 3 villagers dead along a riverbank. 2 men and a woman, shot through the back. No weapons, no boots. One of them had a photograph clutched in their hand, faded, folded, water-stained. "VC Courier," said Sergeant Rollins. Probably warned and ignored. We did what we had to. But something in Tom's stomach turned. He picked up the photograph and slipped it into his pocket. It's just a reminder, he told himself later that night. A name I'll never know. A face I'll never forget. July came fast, and with it, the rain. Endless, smothering, wall-like rain. They'd been deployed in the jungle for 5 days, mud-caked, blood-worn, and mosquito-bitten beyond reason, when the order came down to check a cluster of villages near the eastern foothills. Intelligence reports said there was enemy activity, which usually meant farmers with sons who carried rifles at night. Tom's squad of 7 moved at dawn. The first village was empty, not deserted, just eerily still. Smoke drifted from a cooking fire. Chickens scattered. A dog barked once and vanished into the banana trees. "Split and clear," Craig ordered. 3-man sweep, eyes open, no heroes. Tom was paired with Rollins and a new recruit named Morales, barely 19, acne still fresh beneath his helmet strap. They moved through the huts, calling softly, weapons raised but trembling. Then they heard it. A shout, a child's voice. Then footsteps. Tom's heart jumped into his throat. They emerged into a clearing. Ahead of them, near a dilapidated well, stood a boy, small, barefoot, maybe 6 years old. His shirt was torn and his feet bled from the stones. But it wasn't the blood that stunned Tom. It was the boy's face. He was screaming something in Vietnamese, arms flailing, eyes locked on them. Then the boy ran, not away, but toward them. Rollins raised his rifle. Tom stepped in front of him. "Don't!" he barked. The world held its breath. The boy stopped 5 feet away, panting, shaking, still shouting in Vietnamese. His words made no sense to Tom, but the fear in them was unmistakable, urgent, desperate. Tom pointed toward the huts. "He's warning us," he said. Rollins cursed. "Or distracting us." But Tom had already started moving. Behind the largest hut, under a collapsed awning, Tom found a small gap in the ground, a covered pit, masked by straw and branches, a hiding place. He knelt. Inside, a woman, late 20s, dirt-streaked, wide-eyed. She clutched 2 children in her arms, a baby and a girl no older than the boy outside. The woman didn't scream. She just looked at him, straight into him. Tom didn't know why, but something inside him unraveled. He took off his helmet and set it down. He lowered his rifle, and then, for the first time since arriving in Vietnam, he said softly, "I see you." Rollins came up behind him. "What the hell's going on?" he barked. Tom stood. Civilians, no threat. Craig arrived moments later, looked at the pit, then at Tom. "Lieutenant," Tom said firmly, "I'll vouch. They're not VC." Craig hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. "Seal the area. Move out. We've wasted enough time." The rest of the patrol passed the hut without stopping. Tom stayed behind a moment longer. He looked back down into the pit. The woman still stared at him. The baby whimpered. The older girl hid her face. Then, without a word, the woman raised her hand, not in fear, not in gratitude, just acknowledgement, like she had expected this moment and had been waiting for him. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He sat beneath a palm tree, notebook in hand, but the words wouldn't come. The pages remained blank. The war kept moving. The green kept swallowing everything. But for the first time, something had stayed behind. Not a wound, not a kill, but a choice. A moment when he could have been the enemy and wasn't. And that was the part that scared him most. Tom Barrett returned to the United States in late December 1970. He stepped off the C-141 transport into a cold Georgia dawn, his boots sinking into slush, the taste of jet fuel still clinging to his teeth. The welcome was no parade, no flags, no one clapping, just a tired staff sergeant handing out discharge packets like cafeteria trays. His mother hugged him at the bus station in Spokane, then never spoke of Vietnam again, not once. He went home, and then left again. There were too many familiar things that felt wrong. The smell of soap, the hum of refrigerators, the ease with which people complained about parking spots and coffee brands. So he left Washington State for Oregon, bought a stretch of land near Klamath Falls with his service pay, and started building a cabin, by hand, board by board. He took odd jobs when he needed to, mostly at mills or on road crews where no one asked many questions. What he wanted was quiet. What he got was silence. The dreams came anyway. They didn't start with blood. They started with sounds, the rustle of grass in rain, the snap of twigs under barefoot heels, the distant sound of a child crying. Sometimes he would hear someone whisper in Vietnamese, soft and urgent. Once, he woke up standing in the middle of the woods behind his cabin, barefoot, his shirt soaked in sweat. He didn't remember walking there. He tried writing, tried putting it down in the green notebook he had carried through the jungle, but the words came out in fragments. No grammar, no full sentences, just shapes of emotion. The woman in the pit. Did I save them or delay the next man's bullet? The boy's scream still sounds like a gunshot. Some silences are heavy, some are protective. I don't know which kind I carry. He buried the notebook in a box beneath the floorboards, not because he wanted to forget, but because he feared what remembering would do. In 1978, a letter arrived at his cabin from a clinic in Oklahoma. A nurse he had once dated, briefly, before the war had passed away during childbirth. The father was unknown. The child, a boy of Vietnamese heritage, had no one. Tom didn't think. He just packed a bag, flew down, and 2 weeks later brought Daniel home. Daniel Barrett was a quiet baby. Black hair, wide eyes, brown skin that made neighbors stare but not speak. He cried less than other children, maybe because he had already understood something about this world. Tom wasn't good at parenting. He was firm, distant, incapable of lullabies or bedtime stories. But he was present. He fed him, changed him, held him during fevers, taught him how to tie knots, whittle wood, plant things that could survive Oregon frost. Never once did he say why he had adopted Daniel. The boy never asked. Until he was 13, they had been chopping wood. It was winter. Cold air turned every breath to fog. Daniel, now lean, sharp-eyed, paused mid-swing. "Pop?" he asked. "Why me?" Tom didn't look up, just split the log. "You're my son," he said flatly. "I know, but why me? You don't even like talking to people." Tom set the axe down. He wiped his hands, turned to the boy, looked him in the eyes, and said, "Because once, a little boy ran into gunfire just to protect his family, and I couldn't forget him." That was all. Daniel never asked again. Tom worked in forestry for a time. Then, as a trail guide, he aged into a man with deep-set eyes, a limp in his left knee, and a voice so quiet people leaned in to hear it. He kept to himself. Married once. Briefly. A woman named Karen. She left not because he was unkind, but because he never let her inside the parts of him that mattered. He loved her, but love, he realized, needed more than presence. It needed memory. And his were locked away too deep. On the rare occasions when Daniel brought friends home from college, Tom would stay on the porch. He didn't dislike the noise. It just didn't feel like it belonged to him anymore. He'd listen to them laugh through the walls and wonder what his own voice had once sounded like when it was carefree. He never watched war films, didn't subscribe to papers, didn't join veteran groups. Once, a neighbor asked if he'd been in the big one. Tom had replied, "No, just the long one," then turned and walked away. But sometimes, at night, when the moon hit the pines just right and the wind carried the scent of wet earth, he would light a candle and pull out a second notebook. This one blank. He would sit at the desk, the same desk where he now kept Lynn's letter, and write things he never intended to send. I think I should have said something that day. In the pit. Maybe just one word, maybe go or safe. But I was afraid that if I spoke, I'd break the moment. I still don't know if my silence was kindness or cowardice. You were holding a baby. I remember your left arm trembling. You kept your back between us like a shield. That's what mothers do. I never forgot that. Sometimes I think you never left that pit, that you've been living there in my memory all these years, waiting for me to come back and look you in the eyes again. Then, one autumn afternoon, while organizing the attic, Daniel found the original green notebook, the one from 1970. He didn't read it all, just one page. He left it on the table with a note. If there's more like this, you should publish it or send it to someone. This matters, Pop. Tom had stared at the page for hours, then took the notebook, packed it into a small box, and drove it to the nearest second-hand bookstore 2 counties over. He gave it to the owner, said it was old writings, no use to him now. The man nodded, tossed it onto a shelf in the back. Tom never thought of it again until Lynn's letter arrived. 55 years of silence, of half-sentences, of what-ifs that never became actions. And then one day, a voice from the other side of the world reached through the noise and said, "You did matter." That night, Tom pulled the green notebook from under the floorboards. Yes, he had another copy. He always did, just in case. He opened to the last page. Blank. He picked up a pen, its weight somehow heavier than before, and began to write again. The flight to Vietnam was long. Tom hadn't been on a plane in over 20 years. The last time had been for a funeral. This time, it felt like something quieter, not a mission, not a pilgrimage, just a reckoning. He didn't bring much. One small suitcase, his passport, a copy of Lynn's letter, and the notebook. Daniel had insisted on helping him book the trip. "You sure about this, Pop?" he'd asked, eyes searching his father's face. Tom had nodded. "I need to go. I think I need to give something back." Daniel had hugged him. For the first time in a long while, Tom had held on a second longer. They landed in Hanoi, then flew south to Hue. The airport was small, clean, modern. A woman in a green ao dai held a sign that read, "Mr. Tom Barrett, welcome." Her name was Owen. She was Lynn's granddaughter, fluent in English, with a calm, measured way of speaking that reminded him of a mountain stream, steady, not rushed. Her smile was warm, but not overly familiar. She offered him a bottle of water and asked softly, "Do you remember anything?" Tom looked out the window. "Some things. Some I wish I didn't. But mostly, yes." She nodded. "Then maybe this will help you remember the rest." The car ride was quiet. Tom watched the countryside shift, rice paddies still glowing under the afternoon sun, motorbikes weaving like fish in a stream, distant hills wrapped in mist. The smell of earth, water buffalo, and incense came in waves and pointed out places. "That's the Perfume River. Here was once a French outpost. This road used to be gravel. Your trucks passed here, probably." But Tom said little. He was listening to something else. The land was humming, like it remembered him. They arrived at a small village outside Hue as dusk fell. It wasn't the same place he remembered, not exactly. New houses, paved paths, electric lines, children playing soccer in uniforms. But the banyan tree was still there, taller, broader, older. And behind it, the remains of the old well. Tom stared at it, unmoving, as if the ground might open and release 1970 in a single breath. "She lives just up this path," Anne said gently. "She's expecting you." The house was modest, tile roof, clay walls, shaded courtyard with flower pots and wind chimes. The door opened before he knocked. There she was, Lynn. Older, of course. Wrinkles tracing every corner of her face, her hair mostly white, pulled back in a simple bun. She wore a plain al-baba and held a cup of tea in both hands. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then, very softly, she said, "You haven't changed, just older." Tom's voice caught. "You remember?" She smiled faintly. "Of course. I remembered your eyes before I remembered your face." He stepped forward, stopped, and bowed. A full, low, deliberate bow. When he stood up, she nodded. No words, just a nod that said, "I see you." They sat in the courtyard. The evening birds chirped overhead. Lynn poured tea, her hands still steady. Tom looked around. "I never thought I'd be here again." "I never thought I'd write that letter," she replied. "But then my daughter found your notebook." "She speaks English?" "She translates for NGOs. She lived in Saigon. She saw your name, brought it home. I told her the story. She said you should know." Tom stared at the tea. "I didn't do enough." "You did everything," Lynn said quietly. He looked at her, startled. "You didn't pull the trigger. That day, I thought we were going to die. My brother had been shot the week before. They came at night, took our neighbor's son, my children. They were just babies. And then I saw you, and I thought, this is the end." She paused, then added, "But you didn't speak. You didn't shout. You just looked at me like a person, like I was not your enemy. That was enough." Tom took out the notebook, placed it on the table. Lynn reached for it. Her fingers brushed the leather. "I wrote about that day," he said, "many times, but I never sent it. I wasn't sure if it would mean anything." She opened the notebook, read a line, then another, then closed it again. "It means everything," she said simply. Later, Anne returned with food: grilled fish, rice, banana leaf soup. Tom hadn't tasted these flavors in over half a century. The fish flaked softly on his tongue, and the soup was warm, like memory. He ate slowly, like each bite was a bridge back through time. Lynn watched him carefully. "You carry shame," she said, not as an accusation, but an observation. Tom nodded. "I should have said something. I should have done more." "You didn't say anything," she replied, "because the world we lived in then didn't allow it. You didn't have to speak to be heard. I saw what was in your silence." They sat in quiet a while longer. Then Tom said, "I didn't come for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted to know if I was right. That day. To spare you." "You didn't spare me," Lynn said, her voice stronger now. "You spared yourself, and that's okay." Before he left, Lynn walked him back to the banyan tree. The moon had risen. The tree's roots coiled like old bones, the trunk carved by time and storm. She pointed to a small altar at its base. Incense sticks, a faded photograph, a bowl of rice. "That's my brother," she said. Tom bowed again. Then she turned to him and said, "I lit a candle for you every year, even before I knew your name. I called you the Silent Soldier." He laughed, quietly, a sound rusty from disuse. "I never deserved a candle." "You still don't," she smiled, "but I lit one anyway." That night, Tom slept in the guest room. For the first time in decades, he dreamed of Vietnam and didn't wake up in a cold sweat. This time, he was standing beside the old well. The boy ran toward him, but instead of screaming, he laughed. And in the dream, Tom knelt and opened his arms. The cabin hadn't changed. Same pine trees leaning in like old sentinels. Same trail of pine cones leading to the porch. But Tom Barrett, as he stepped out of the pickup truck, knew something inside him had shifted in a way he couldn't name yet. It was late afternoon. The Oregon light slanted low, golden between the trunks. He breathed deeply, and for the first time in decades, the air didn't feel heavy. Daniel was already waiting at the door. "You're back," he said, opening his arms. "I'm back," Tom replied. And this time, it didn't feel like a lie. They sat inside later, drinking coffee, the wood stove popping. Daniel leaned forward. "So?" Tom handed him the letter from Lynn. Daniel read slowly, eyes scanning each line, then pausing. When he looked up, there was a quiet in his face Tom hadn't seen before. "You were the one, weren't you? In the notebook. The soldier who didn't shoot." Tom nodded. "And she's the woman you saved?" "Not saved," Tom said. "Just didn't fail." Daniel held the paper in both hands. "You never told me." "I couldn't, because I didn't know if silence had been cowardice or mercy. I carried it so long it became part of me." Daniel didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You gave me a name, a home, a life. Maybe it's time you let yourself have one too." The next morning, Tom took the green notebook, creased, travel-worn, and sat at the desk by the window. Outside, birds returned to the feeder. The sky was pale and clear. He opened to the very last page. The lines were blank. He picked up a pen. "To Lynn," he wrote, "and to those who lived after we should have died." His hand moved slowly, not because of age, but because each word had weight. "The jungle took things from me, things I thought I would never get back. Trust, rest, the belief that I was more than a weapon. But the day I saw you holding your children in silence, something broke inside me, and I think that's when I started to become human again. I didn't say anything then because I didn't believe words could survive war, but now I know. Silence can carry grace too. Thank you for your memory, for your letter, for surviving me." He signed it simply, "Tom," then closed the notebook, and with it the chapter he had feared would never end. That spring, Tom began doing something new. He walked into town once a week, joined a veterans group, not to talk, but to listen. He spoke at a local college once, when Daniel's friend invited him to share his story. He told them about the tree, the pit, the scream, and the silence that followed. When a student asked him, "Would you do it all again?" he said no, but I wouldn't undo that one day. On Memorial Day, Daniel brought his own son, Tom's grandson, to the cabin. The boy was 7, full of questions and stubborn energy. He ran through the woods like he'd been born to them. At one point, he stopped and pointed to a framed photo on the shelf. It was the banyan tree. "Is that a magic tree?" he asked. Tom smiled. "Something like that." The boy grinned and went back to playing. Daniel looked at his father. "Do you still have the notebook?" Tom nodded. "I'm going to leave it for him one day, when he's old enough to understand silence." The last time Tom wrote in it, he was sitting on the porch, the scent of rain in the air. He didn't write about war, or guilt, or fear. He wrote, "Today, a child laughed in the woods and didn't flinch when a branch snapped behind him. Today, I watched the sky and didn't expect fire. Today, I remembered you without shame. That is enough." Then he closed the book, lit a candle, and let the silence be holy again.